Hello and welcome to today's CDCT live session. My name's Jason Rader and I'll be your host as we tackle the topic today on SD-WAN and its evolution and how it works into modern operations. We're excited to have two experts on this subject with us today. We've got Mike Moore, Practice Development Manager, and Philip Little, Solution Architect, both from CDCT with me. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome. Thanks for having us, Jason.
I'm glad that you're here. So let's do kind of the norm of kicking us off and talk about, well, define the topic that we're going to talk about for the rest of the day. So SD-WAN, somebody tell me, because let's just throw caution to the wind and assume that it needs to be defined before we go forward. I know there's a lot of smart people out there listening, but somebody take a stab at defining SD-WAN for me.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take a crack at that, and Philip can add any color if I miss something. But I mean, really, it's just the next evolution of WAN, right? So, I mean, there's been a few iterations of traditional WAN where we had token ring all the way back in the day, and then we had our traditional routing that we have today, where it's just routing packets back and forth. Then we had like IWAN, where it was intelligent, had some intelligence, you could do some steering and have the best path selection. And now with software-defined WAN, we're really able to make routing decisions based on what's important to the business. And that could be an application, it could be sending traffic over a lower cost link, so we're not spending as much on it. I mean, really, it's just adding a layer of software and intelligence to that WAN so that you can make more intelligent routing decisions and not just that IP-based routing that you had before, and you get a little more flexibility and agility in the way that you're performing those types of decisions. Philip, yeah, anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's right. I think today, you can purchase an MPLS or your T1. You're kind of terminated to a router, and you kind of lack visibility and control to what Michael was saying. You're abstracting that software layer from the hardware layer. And it gives you more intelligence where you can make routing decisions based upon application rather than just traditional ACLs or other things.
Gotcha. So I mean, it sounds like it's awesome, right? Why don't we? Because all you had to say was more visibility and the ability to do it sounds like very efficient things with instead of just the access control lists of old with IP addresses and those types of things in them. So why isn't everybody? This has been around for a while. Why hasn't everybody kind of embraced this up to this point?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of plays in the market. I mean, it's consolidated quite a bit in the past year, actually. But I mean, looking at a year ago to now, there was 60 plus vendors in the SD-WAN space. So I think there was a lot of the analysis paralysis, like what is the best solution? Obviously, there's a lot of leaders. If you follow Gartner, you've got the Magic Quadrant, and everyone in that top right is a contender to be a good solution environments today, but figuring out who's going to make the most sense in your environment can be a challenge for a lot of customers. And I mean, each SD-WAN solution does their routing or their application visibility or their security a little bit different. So finding what's going to make the most sense for your business can sometimes be a challenge, I think.
Yep. Yeah, and I agree. And there's many flavors out there today too, right? I mean, some customers just have traditional hub and spoke topology, right? Where they're just, all their applications reside in the data center. They're connected to a couple of branch offices. And then you have, some customers that saying, hey, what's this SD-WAN thing? I'm paying a lot for this MPLS cost. What can I get out of SD-WAN? Can it save me money? And then you have your more complex environments too, right? That are, they're multi-cloud. They use a lot of SaaS-based applications. They're geographically dispersed. They got 150 to 200 locations, all throughout the U.S. So it kind of varies, and they really don't kind of know where to start or know how SD-WAN can really benefit them.
No, sure. I mean, and you talked about MPLS, and there's some lock-in associated with technologies related to that, so it might not have been the right spot, for people. The capital investment that it takes to do this, the literally reimagining the way that you're dealing with your network and your applications, because you just don't plug some gear in and everything magically works. You really got to know what you want to, what you want to evoke out of it before you're going to get the most out of it, right?
Right, and that's another good point too. I mean, the fact that it's really just becoming mainstream and then aligning with refresh cycles. So I mean, a lot of people have WAN equipment that are in place today. It's working well. They still have support on it for another year, 2, 3. So I mean, it doesn't really make sense. A lot of times SD-WAN is more of a modernization play where you're coming near term on that equipment, or maybe you are looking to go to a more direct internet access model and your MPLS circuits are coming up for expiration. So when we think of it from that perspective, and then getting SD-WAN into your environment, it kind of comes naturally with that, where we typically see that a little more than, oh, well, I have this one compliance CERN, we need to segment traffic across the WAN. And that is a play, but are you going to update your whole infrastructure for that? Maybe. Right. It depends on the compliance concern and how much money is tied to the business on the back end to meet that compliance requirement, right?
Yeah. Well, if the board says so, yes, but otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. You need that really good business case. And I mean, obviously modernization is going to be one of the best cases for that, because you have to allocate the money. You have to set aside the funds to upgrade your network. Otherwise, you're going to be in a spot where you're out of support on your legacy hardware, and nobody really wants to be in that position.
Yeah. Right. No, and I think, so it might have been the whole reason we even wanted to talk about SD-WAN is so I could say, what's SASE? So tell me how this is the evolution. Tell me what's going on here, because first of all, I feel awkward saying it in the first place. But
yeah, well, everyone likes to get sassy every once in a while. So, I mean, sassy, I mean, we all heard that term that Gartner coined, made up in the past year, right? So, right. I mean, it's a really powerful term, though. It's more of an architecture where we're seeing that mesh of cloud security and cloud networking all coming together. So, I mean, having software-defined WAN and tying that to cloud security is kind of the nirvana of agility, especially in the times that we're talking about today, right? Where we have more people working from home. We have people starting to return to the office now. How do we provide a consistent security policy for our branch users, for our remote users, regardless of where they're connecting? And SASE is really that model that's bringing that all together, where we're seeing that convergence of both networking and security.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing a lot recently too, right? Where a customer comes up to SD-WAN and they don't really know much about it, but they're also saying, I'm hearing about SASE. What's secure access service edge? We need that. And then you have to talk to them, say, hey, do you have cloud apps? How many locations do you have? What are you connecting to? Do you have hybrid cloud? All those kind of are really factors when you start playing in the SASE world. And in most cases than not, we'll talk to customers and kind of talk them off the ledge if they're only mostly on premises and applications that are residing in their data center.
Right. And what's also interesting about that too, Philip, is when you talk about the melding of networking and security, traditionally we have two teams that handle that, right? You'll have your networking team, your architects, your security architects, and a lot of times in software-defined WAN solutions, you have that security integrated into the solution, whether it's a stateful firewall, IPS, IDS, you name it. And there's always that little bit of contention. Who's going to manage this? Do we need to do some kind of role-based access to the solution? And the SASE model kind of helps address that, because you can have a cloud-based security appliance that checks in with your on-prem appliances, and it's all integrated, where the security team can handle that portion of it. And then the networking team handles how that's going to route, what the loss, what the latency, jitter, how the circuits are performing, things like that. So a really cool model to introduce, where you have those kind of siloed approaches to networking and security.
Yep. And I'd say too, another key advantage for SASE, right? If you're more worried about protecting security at the cloud or at the edge too, right? If you're have multiple geographic locations and you have different point of presences throughout, and you're worried about that security. So that's when those really come into play, when you're accessing the cloud and SaaS applications.
Yeah, and I think you had mentioned, Mike, that it's kind of an architecture, right? So it doesn't mean that they have to choose SD-WAN and never go to SASE. It can be the evolution of their own architecture as well, as they implement additional feature sets or other products into the mix, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the beauty of the SD-WAN solutions that are out there today. I mean, they were designed where you could deploy these on-prem, you could deploy them in the cloud. So if you have existing infrastructure that you want to keep for a while, they're brand new, you don't have that end of support, end of life issue that you're worried about, you can do things like service chaining to send all your traffic to get inspected there if it needs it. Or you can use the SD-WAN appliance at the edge of your network to do that direct internet access. Maybe you need a firewall at the branch. It just depends on what you're trying to do and what the compliance requirements are. But it definitely gives you a phased approach to go to a SASE type model, the way that we have the on-prem and cloud solution options for both security and SD-WAN.
Yeah, and to your point too, Jason, you can buy a piece of hardware, right, and just do SD-WAN in most vendor cases, and then obviously introduce your SASE model later if you intend, or if you're not really in the cloud, or you're You don't have a lot of SaaS applications today, but you do in the future. It's definitely an add-on that you could do later.
Fantastic. No, and I think that's where, you know, sometimes back to that paralysis by analysis approach that some folks get into, you know, thinking that they're locking into something is a problem. Just like locking into MPLS and those kinds of things is a situation where there may be, and that's not specific to this particular area. You get locked into things all the time. We talk about people getting locked into cloud providers or other things like that, but that sometimes makes people very hesitant to embrace newer things, especially when it was just a coined / made up word from Gartner recently, right? But I think what it does show, there's a lot of great stuff. And I just gave a statement to PR earlier today talking about what I really think 2021 is going to bring to a lot of folks is when the COO and the CFO, they're looking for efficiencies and cost optimization. Those are really big on their minds. And I'm telling security professionals, align to that wherever you can. And this seems like a great opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you said, it's really that mesh of the security and the networking that is gonna take you to that next level when you're coming up for that refresh in the WAN for sure. But I mean, the security considerations when you think of how you can segment traffic if you're connecting to public cloud. I mean, whether you're going to Azure, Google Cloud, AWS, you can build direct IPsec connectivity to those service providers. So if you're leveraging infrastructure as a service and you have that whole infrastructure already built in the cloud, all the different SD-WAN providers have some kind of flavor of that connectivity where you can get that kind of secure access where it's MPLS-like from your branch location straight into the cloud and have all those security mechanisms layered on top of that.
Yeah, and even for remote workers too, Michael, Jason, you can obviously with a SASE type approach, you can, all your remote workers are connecting remotely. Obviously, if you're mostly SaaS and again cloud apps, you can connect remotely from home, just like your on premises, wherever your point of presence may be.
Nice. So I think Philip, you told me a story about a giant cost savings that somebody realized. Can you, without using, protecting the innocent, no names here, but tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah. So this was more of one of the simpler customers, right? They had came to us and, they were a German-based company. They're saying, hey, we're paying on the arm and leg for managing PLS. What can we do? And all that we simply did was go in there. We did a POC with a particular customer. They had locations in China, Brazil, and we actually POC'd in each of these locations. And with that POC, they essentially said, hey, can we keep it, or what do we need to do to replace this? Right. And then we obviously showed them cost savings. And not only that, they had a lot of issues with, up and down, and they knew they were paying this company all this money and they recently had an outage. So we showed them the traffic distribution, what you could do with, they actually keep their MPLS. So we showed them between VPN and MPLS. We showed them the traffic distribution, the failure that you can get out of that and the visibility into that as well. So that was a pretty easy win for us.
Sounds complicated, but that's why what's awesome about it is, when I say complicated, you talked about a lot of efficiencies that came into play because of the switch over to the software-defined aspects of it, right? Yep.
Yeah, that and the application. So they were mostly an on-premises shop. They just got integrated to SaaS in the U.S. location. So they obviously used that for the Brazil and China operations to backhaul traffic back to that SaaS, because they have some designers and stuff too as well working here in this location. So they use those efficiencies and were able to steal applications, whereas before they were just terminating routes and they gave them a 20 meg circuit and that was kind of it. They had like a dashboard that they could show bandwidth utilization. They were able to burst a little bit, but that was that. And just showing them SD-WAN, just doing that POC, it really blew their socks off, if you will, to be honest. So
nice.
That's what I mean by it. Yep.
Oh, thanks. The whole cost optimization stuff, we sometimes think of the links and those kinds of things, but what about management? I hear that management's a lot more optimized in this particular case.
Yeah, that's oftentimes a big play when it comes into that cost savings conversations, because unless you're getting into tens, hundreds, thousands of sites, sometimes you may not even realize the true cost benefit of migrating away from MPLS. Yeah, there may be a little bit of savings, but commodity broadband compared to MPLS it's starting to get a lot more comparable. But again, it depends on the geography, right? But when it comes to managing, maintaining the network, having a single console or the orchestrator within your SD-WAN environment to do that configuration, the monitoring, the troubleshooting, it significantly reduces the time that it would take a traditional architect to go and make all those changes that you're traditionally used to. I mean, if you think of having to hop into a router via SSH and typing in your CLI commands, or maybe you've done some scripting in the past, so you're having that all automated for you, but now you can do that all through a centralized pane of glass. You can use APIs, you can do a lot of scripting, Python, Ansible, and create a lot of automation that works at that software level that's going to configure all of these devices for you. So really, when we're talking a cost savings from SD-WAN, you have to think of the soft costs that are associated with that, right? You may not see a tangible increase by circuit costs going down, though you might, like I said, if you have multiple, but the time that your IT is going to save troubleshooting that WAN, configuring it, they're going to be able to invest that back into the business somewhere else and hopefully focus on delivery of other services rather than keeping the lights on for your networking infrastructure.
So regulatory and the other things, I mean, when we talk about being able to define things at this level as opposed to the old methods, I think you had, Philip, you had told me an interesting story about, there's a lot of regulatory requirements in certain places, especially China, for example. So doing things there, it's difficult to work around the complications related to that. And you told me you had a big success doing a project over there.
Yeah,
Again, let's keep the names anonymous here.
Yeah, and that was that same customer, right? They had thought, there's VPN restrictions whenever they use their standard telco provider, right? But we actually, within the POC, that's something that they wanted to test. Are we able to get out with their ingress and egress restrictions coming in and out of China? Is this going to work? They've been up and going for a year, and it was proven. That was that case.
No, thanks.
Yep.
And that's one of those things that that's affecting us in a lot of ways. And I think I was just on a call with a client yesterday, just talking about some regulatory requirement type things. But now, to be able to do business with certain people, you've got to be able to say everywhere that their data is in motion, all of the security mechanisms that are in place, and having the additional visibility that services like this allow you to have additional security controls in place that you wouldn't previously.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, in the dashboards, you'll have a lot of different analytics you can have. You can see your traffic flows, you can see where they're going, source destination type traffic. So, I mean, obviously really important when it comes to proving innocence if something were to happen, right? So also more reporting and enhancements are coming into the solutions. If you're looking at integrated architectures where maybe you stick with one portfolio because you love them and they have security, SD-WAN, networking, visibility and control, all that, those solutions can tie together to give you a really complete picture of your network. So it definitely helps in situations like that where there's big compliance concerns and you need to have that visibility into everything.
Thank you. Philip, so if the first example that you gave us was kind of a non-complex angle, give us an example of a complex solution that you provided recently.
Yes, more recently we had a customer that was they're actually looking. They've currently ingested 8 sites. They're a manufacturing company. They're actually looking to ingest several more. So obviously we've had kind of a bake off about 6 to 8 months ago. They've got multiple cloud apps. They're also using both Azure and GCP. So obviously we first tested out your integrated SD-WAN within a traditional next generation firewall. And we found out that that wasn't really going to work for them with with the multiple sites, right? They're going to have almost 80 to 100 more later on. So we found that having those, it's more of a SASE type solution would work better for them, and that's what we did. So, and also it's more of a compliance thing, to your point too. It gives them a central pane of glass, and also there was a power struggle within this company too. So. Just being able to manage that and give access to a central orchestration platform was definitely huge.
No, that's a big deal. I mean, the title of our presentation was how this enables the modern IT operations, and that's definitely an angle for that for sure.
Yep.
So what are those, I appreciate the conversation, guys. I think we've got people interested. For the uninitiated folks, I think this might have been their first talk about SASE. But what are some of the caveats? Usually we say tell people where to start, but I think probably as the guide for some folks who are journeying here, what are some of the caveats they should look out for as they're looking at solutions like this? I'll let you both go. Mike, why don't you start off?
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that too is we talked about why these technologies or why SD-WAN may not have been adopted yet in certain environments, and we talked about that modernization play. But along with that comes the education and training around new technologies, right? So I mean, with anything, there comes a new learning curve. You're having to learn a new tool. I mean, traditionally, if you done one particular router in your environment your entire life, you may go to that same vendor's SD-WAN solution and you're going to get a whole new look and feel, but you'll be able to get the same data from that graphical user interface, right? So that adoption is a little challenging. So I would definitely encourage people to get up to speed on that, or at least start that training when you're considering doing a POC. I mean, what's going to make sense in your environment, and definitely try to limit that too. We mentioned the analysis paralysis. So if you get in there and you're POCing 5, 6, 7 different SD-WAN solutions, I mean, think of all the cycles that your IT team is going to spend and your architects vetting those solutions. So try to identify the solutions that you think would make sense in your environment, maybe with existing architectures, or maybe if you've heard things about a different vendor and you're really curious about how they can deliver that differently, pick them. So I mean, keep it to 2 or 3 for that POC, and then have a really set requirement of what you want to test. I mean, obviously there's some core functionalities that you need, and that's the reason why you're considering SD-WAN. So am I going to be able to use direct internet access and get to the cloud? Am I going to be able to improve that application performance? Can I segment traffic to my CRM server or SAP server or something in the data center? So having a clear set of goals for an SD-WAN solution and documenting those and then working towards that's going to be really your best area for success as you're going down the path of SD-WAN.
Well said. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, I'll echo that. And also to Michael's point, I think it really depends on your business requirements too, right? Are you a traditional hub and spoke? Do you have applications at the data center? What are your security requirements? Because obviously, there's so many flavors out there and more to come. So and they all some do things better than others, and some don't do them at all. So where you start really depends upon your business requirements, and also, how deep are you in with a particular vendor too, right? I mean, so typically that's really the first place to start. Are you a full Cisco shop? Are you a full Fortinet shop? Are you a full VMware shop? Typically, that's where most of our customers start there. And if that doesn't work, or is there a particular use case, that we'll go into another scenario or vendor.
Yeah, and that's a good point too about the topologies that you have in your environment. I mean, a lot of people think of SD-WAN as we need to do this all at once. It's a very methodical, phased approach migration. You get your head end stood up, you can bring on a couple branches, and that will interoperate with your traditional routing and legacy network. So you can really kick the tires on that solution, see what makes sense, work out the kinks before you roll it out to your entire infrastructure. And the nice thing too is you can do this across the MPLS circuit. So if the end goal is to get to an all internet type connectivity, which maybe that's right for you, maybe it's not. Maybe you keep some MPLS and augment with internet connectivity, but you can keep that traditional model or the hub and spoke or mesh topology that you have today with that SD-WAN environment and do a really tactical approach at getting that converted to all software-defined WAN. And then you may introduce SASE and direct internet access later as an added benefit to get the true optimization for those SaaS applications rather than having to backhaul to your data center and out.
Fantastic. No, I think, talking about how all this stuff comes together, I mean, it's paying attention to, first of all, business requirements are always a good thing to define up front. Understanding that vendor lock-in, understanding the roadmap and the evolution that it can potentially take, and optimization, cost savings, automation, all of those fun things that you should figure out along the way. Very sound advice. Thank you both gentlemen for hanging with me this morning, I guess. Philip, Mike, appreciate you guys' time. And if you folks out there would like to see more about what we do here, please visit us at insightcdct.com. Thanks and have a good day.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Philip.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Pleasure being
Thanks,
here.
guys.